Should you try and buy the 6900 XT now or wait for the 3080 Ti? Let's talk about it. Before that, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you never miss another video. So the 6900 XT is set to be releasing on December 8th for around $1,000, and when you compare it to the RTX 3090, it should be offering some pretty dang good value in that price range, because compared to the RTX 3090, the 6800 XT with the heavy overclock, as I showed when you water cooled it, should be roughly on par with the RTX 3090, meaning that if you add another 8 compute units with the 6900 XT and it's overclocked, it actually might be able to overtake the RTX 3090 in a majority of titles, and we're talking about a $1,000 GPU here versus a $1,500 GPU. So the RX 6900 XT is looking like the obvious choice, but how's it going to stack up against a $1,000 RTX 3080 Ti with potentially the same performance as the 3090 that's supposedly coming out in January of 2021, and which one will actually be available? And that's what I want to talk about. And the first thing we got to figure out here is, where roughly is the 6900 XT going to actually perform in games? Because although it does have, I believe, somewhere around 11% more shaders, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be 11% faster, and the only bit of leaked information that's come out so far has come in the form of a tweet by Tom Apisak that was shared over on videocards.com, which, by the way, there will be a link to all my sources in the description below. But in any case, apparently in this tweet, the RX 6900 XT got a score of 169,779 in Geekbench 5. So that makes it supposedly 12% faster than the RX 6800 XT, which is pretty impressive. But supposedly the RTX 3080 is still 4% faster, and the 3090 is 19% faster. Now, that might sound kind of disappointing, but you got to remember that Geekbench 5 is a very compute-heavy type of benchmark, and the Ampere GPUs are also a very compute-heavy architecture. So that means that, these RTX 30 series GPUs, of course, are going to have a very strong showing in a benchmark such as Geekbench. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the RX 6900 XT is going to get beat by the RTX 3080 in gaming, and in fact, I don't think that the 6900 XT is going to be that much faster than the 6800 XT either, despite the fact that it showed about a 12% gain over it in Geekbench, because, from what I know about the RDNA 2 architecture, I would expect about 11% more shaders to scale somewhere around probably only 5 to 8% faster in actual gaming performance, because, architectures just don't scale perfectly, and so that would actually make the 6900 XT a little bit slower than the RTX 3090, but like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about a $1,000 GPU versus a $1,500 GPU, and on top of that, with a little bit of an overclock, the 6900 XT would probably be able to at least match, if not beat, the RTX 3090. But, as good as that sounds, what's the availability going to look like? And here's where things get a little bit concerning, because I'm expecting extremely low supply of the 6900 XT. In fact, Paul over at Not an Apple Fan, which, by the way, you should go subscribe to him, told me that supposedly his sources are saying that it's going to be very, very low supply, probably around 50% of the launch supply of the 6800 XT, which is definitely not good, because the 6800 XT had a pretty horrible launch. I mean, it was extremely difficult to get any of those cards, so to see potentially only half of that being available for the 6900 XT, well, it's going to be very, very difficult indeed to get one of these cards on launch day. And, the AIB cards will probably make it a little bit easier when they come out, but according to an overclockers.ru article that was shared over on Video Cards, they had this to say, quote, according to the article, AMD board partners will be allowed to make custom designs based on the Navi 21 XTX GPU. The story claims that due to limited time that was given to AIBs, the first design should be expected no sooner than early 2021. So to me, that means that, on the launch day, it's going to be extremely difficult to get 6900 XTs, and it's probably not going to improve all the way into, the first quarter of 2021, and hopefully that means January you'll start seeing AIB cards, which means that the overall supply will probably start increasing, but it could be even later, meaning that, the 3080 Ti might actually have better supply before the AIB cards launch for the 6900 XT, despite the fact that the 6900 XT is launching in December, whereas the 3080 Ti is supposedly launching in January, which is actually a little bit concerning for AMD, as they had a huge opportunity here to steal a bunch of sales in the high end from Nvidia. So it's a bit of a shame that AMD probably won't be able to follow through with that. But, speaking of the 3080 Ti, let's talk about those specs, which we pretty much know all of them by now, thanks to Twitter leaker Kopite7Kimi, and supposedly it's going to have roughly the same FP32 count as the RTX 3090, which means it'll have 10,496 FP32 cores, or as Nvidia likes to call them, CUDA cores. It should have 20 gigabytes of GDDR6X memory, which is only 4 gigabytes less than the RTX 3090. It should be clocked at 19 gigabits per second on a 320-bit bus for a total bandwidth of 760 gigabytes per second, which I believe is the same as the RTX 3080, and it should have a TGP of 320 watts, which is actually less than the RTX 3090's 350 watts, and supposedly it won't have NVLink, and it should be coming in at a price of $1,000 from everything that I'm hearing, which, you know, if you look at those specs and you look at that price, you're probably going to be looking at a card that's going to give you essentially identical performance to the RTX 3090, as I think cutting down that bandwidth and going from 24 gigabytes to 20 gigabytes isn't really going to affect the performance, and you're going to get all of that for $1,000. And now you're talking about 2 GPUs coming in at $1,000, which they'll likely only be available at some point in January or even potentially later. So you're going to have likely similar availability of both of them in January at the same exact price point potentially. So, you know, you're going to be in a pretty tough situation of, should I buy the RX 6900 XT or should I buy the RTX 3080 Ti? And so I'm going to go over reasons why you should potentially wait, or why you might actually want to just buy the 6900 XT if you can get your hands on either of them. So the reasons why you might want to wait for the RTX 3080 Ti is that, you know, first and foremost, obviously you're getting probably a little bit more VRAM. So if the rumors hold true and it does end up coming with 20 gigabytes of VRAM, well, you're talking about 20 gigabytes versus 16 gigabytes. And if they're the exact same price, well, obviously that gives Nvidia a little bit of a leg up, even if it doesn't really matter for most people. But if you're a professional and you just want a card that, you know, it's not quite a professional card, but you do some professional work, well, that extra 4 gigabytes of VRAM might come in handy. The second reason why you might want to wait is that the RTX 3080 Ti has better ray tracing than the RX 6900 XT, at least right now. So if you want to play games like Cyberpunk 2077, you want to absolutely max them out, and your budget is $1,000, you're totally fine spending $1,000, well, the 3080 Ti is going to have much better ray tracing, so in those games that support it, it's definitely going to run a lot better. And then the third reason why you might want to wait for the 3080 Ti is that it has DLSS and tensor cores. So for professionals that need tensor cores, that's obviously a huge boon to have. And then if you need DLSS to run your games at the maximum performance, because DLSS 2.0 is actually looking really good now, well then again, that's a huge improvement in performance that you get with Nvidia that you simply can't get with AMD. And then the fourth and final reason why you might want to wait for the 3080 Ti is that it has Premiere Pro GPU acceleration working, and the last time I used a 6800 XT, unfortunately it just wasn't working, and that made my work much harder to get done with the Radeon card versus the Nvidia card. Now, of course, those are some pretty good reasons to wait for the 3080 Ti, but what are some reasons why you might want to buy the 6900 XT if you can get your hands on it on day one? Well, the first reason would be that, well, the 3080 Ti just simply is not guaranteed. We don't know 100% if this card is going to be coming out. Now, I'm 99.99% sure that it will, but there's always an off chance that it could be canceled, or it could just be rumors that end up not being true, so you could end up waiting and actually not getting anything. Now, the second reason why you might want to wait is that the 6900 XT with an overclock will likely be at least a little bit faster than the 3080 Ti in the majority of games. So if you're after the absolute fastest card in, you know, DirectX 11 and even a lot of DirectX 12 titles, well, the 6900 XT is probably going to be the card that does that. And then finally, the reason why you might not want to wait is that, well, this 3080 Ti, even if it comes out in January, which is looking very likely, well, it might not be $1,000. I mean, Nvidia could decide, hey, we're going to charge $1,200, at which point, you know, that might be a little bit more than you're willing to spend. So, you know, overall, there's definitely some good reasons to buy the 3080 Ti and wait, and there's some good reasons to buy the 6900 XT when it launches right away. Now, me personally, I'm not going to be buying either of these GPUs because I think they're just a little bit too expensive for me. I just simply can't get myself to spend $1,000 on a GPU. But, you know, overall, if I had to choose one of them, I think I would wait for the 3080 Ti because I think it just has a few more extra things that you don't get with AMD, and with the exact same price, well, it just seems to make more sense to me, at least if they do end up being the exact same price, which is looking pretty likely. But hey, that's just what I think. What do you think about the RTX 3080 Ti versus the 6900 XT? Which would you rather buy? Let me know in the comments below, and of course, I'll see you in the next video. If you made it to the end of the video, be sure to drop a like. Every time you do so, Nvidia and Intel drop prices. Also, if you want to see more, click here. You won't be disappointed.